Rain tapped against the restaurant window as I stared at the small velvet box sitting between us on the white tablecloth. My hands were sweating. Everyone at the table, my parents, Bianca's father, even the waiter, was watching us like we were the main event of the evening. "Bianca, is something wrong?" Ethan asked, forcing a smile. Bianca didn't smile back. She looked calm, too calm, like she had rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror. "I can't marry you, Ethan," Bianca said flatly. "I'm marrying Daniel." The words hit me like cold water. My chest tightened. I heard my mother gasp beside me, but everything else went silent, like the world had muted itself just to make this moment worse. "What are you talking about?" Ethan said, his voice cracking. "We're getting married in 3 months. We picked a venue last week." Bianca slid the ring box across the table toward me. "I don't love you the way I should. I'm sorry, but I've made my choice." "Bianca, please," Ethan said, "not like this. Not in front of everyone." She didn't even flinch. "There's no easy way to do this, Ethan. I thought you deserved to hear it directly, not through a text message." Marcus Whitmore, her father, cleared his throat like this was simply an inconvenient business meeting. "Ethan, you're a good man. But Daniel can offer Bianca a life we've always wanted for her." My own father slammed his hand on the table. "A life? He's talking about money, Ethan. That's all this ever was." "Dad, please," Ethan said, though my voice barely came out. I looked at Bianca one more time, searching her face for even a flicker of guilt. There was none, just relief, like she had been carrying this secret for a long time and was finally free of it. "How long?" Ethan asked quietly. "How long have you known?" Bianca hesitated. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me," Ethan said. "Did you know when we picked the wedding date? When we told our families? When I stayed up all night finishing that stupid seating chart you wanted?" "Ethan, don't make this harder than it already is," Bianca said. "Harder?" Ethan said, his voice rising now. "You're returning my ring at dinner, in front of my parents, and you're telling me not to make this hard?" Daniel Rourke, who I hadn't even noticed walk in, appeared behind Bianca's chair, resting a hand on her shoulder like he owned the moment. My stomach turned. "Ethan, I know this isn't easy," Daniel said, "but Bianca and I—" "Don't," Ethan said, cutting him off. "Don't you dare pretend like you understand anything about easy." My mother reached for my hand under the table, but I pulled away. I didn't want comfort. I wanted answers. I wanted this to be some kind of terrible joke that Bianca would laugh off in a second. She didn't laugh. "I think it's best if you go, Ethan," Bianca said, her voice softer now, almost gentle, like she was doing me a favor. I looked down at the ring box, the one I had saved for 8 months to afford, the one I had imagined on her finger for the rest of our lives. My hands trembled as I picked it up. "You know what the worst part is?" Ethan said, standing up slowly. "I actually believed you loved me." Bianca looked away first. That was the only crack I saw in her composure the entire night. Just a flicker, gone as fast as it appeared. "Ethan," she started. "Don't," Ethan said. "Save it for Daniel." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked straight for the door, past the tables of strangers who had clearly heard everything, past the waiter holding menus he no longer needed to bring, past my own mother calling my name behind me. Outside, the rain had grown heavier, soaking through my jacket within seconds. I didn't care. I welcomed it, actually. It felt like the only honest thing happening to me that night. I opened my palm and looked at the ring one more time under the streetlight. 2 years of my life. 2 years of planning a future with someone who had clearly already chosen a different one. I thought about the day I proposed, how nervous I had been, how Bianca had cried and said yes before I even finished the sentence. Had that been real? Or had she just been waiting for something better to come along? My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my mother. "Asterisk, please come home safe, Ethan. We love you. Asterisk." I closed my eyes, letting the rain wash over my face, mixing with something else I refused to call tears. Somewhere behind me, inside that restaurant, Bianca was probably already accepting Daniel's comfort, moving on like I was nothing more than an inconvenient chapter in her story. But standing there in the rain, ring clenched tightly in my fist, I made myself a quiet promise. I wasn't going to be the man who fell apart over her. I was going to become someone she would regret losing. 3 days after the dinner, I still hadn't left my apartment. The ring sat on my kitchen counter, untouched, like a wound I refused to clean. My phone had 23 missed calls from Bianca. I hadn't answered a single one. A knock at my door pulled me out of my thoughts. I opened it to find Sophie Bennett standing there, holding a paper bag of takeout and wearing the same worried expression she'd had since we were kids. "You look terrible," Sophie said, pushing past me into the apartment. "Thanks," Ethan said. "Really needed to hear that. I brought food." "You're not answering texts, so I figure actions speak louder." Sophie set the bag on the counter, her eyes landing on the ring box. She picked it up slowly. "Ethan, what happened?" "She gave it back," Ethan said, in front of everyone. My parents, her father, the whole restaurant. Sophie's jaw tightened. "She did this in public?" "She said it was easier that way. Said I deserved to hear it directly." Ethan laughed bitterly, as if humiliating me in front of 30 people is somehow the respectful option. Sophie sat down across from me, her expression unreadable. "Ethan, can I say something you might not want to hear? When has that ever stopped you?" Ethan said. "I never trusted her," Sophie said. "Not once. Not since the day you introduced us. I felt something twist in my chest. You never said anything. Would you have listened?" Sophie asked. "You were so happy, Ethan. So sure this was it. I didn't want to be the friend who tried to ruin that." I thought back to the night we met, a charity gala my company sponsored. Bianca had walked in wearing a red dress, laughing at something her father said, completely unaware I was staring at her from across the room. "Do you remember how we met?" Ethan asked. "You told me the story 100 times, Sophie said, smiling faintly. "Love at first sight, some fairy tale nonsense." "She asked me what car I drove," Ethan said quietly. "That was the first thing she said to me. Not my name, not what I did for a living. What car I drove." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "And you didn't think that was strange?" "I thought it was funny," Ethan admitted. "I told her I drove a used Honda, and she laughed and said, 'That's refreshing.' I thought she meant it as a compliment." "Refreshing," Sophie repeated. "Ethan, that's not a compliment. That's someone measuring you." I stayed quiet, letting the memory sink indifferently now. There were more moments like that, small things I had dismissed as quirks, not warnings. "Remember my birthday last year?" Ethan said. "I planned this whole dinner, saved for months to take her somewhere nice. Her father called in the middle of it, and she left the table for 40 minutes. "I remember," Sophie said. "You told me it was a work emergency." "It wasn't work," Ethan said. "It was her father telling her about some real estate deal with the Rourke family. I only found that out later." Sophie leaned forward. "Ethan, did you ever meet Daniel before all this?" "Once," Ethan said, "at her father's company dinner. He shook my hand, called me the architect boyfriend, like I was some kind of hired help instead of the man marrying his daughter." "And Bianca didn't correct him?" Sophie asked. "She laughed," Ethan said. "I remember thinking it was strange, but I let it go. I always let things go." Sophie reached across the table and took my hand. "Ethan, you have to stop blaming yourself for trusting someone. That's not weakness. That's just being human." "I ignored so many signs, Sophie," Ethan said, my voice breaking slightly. "Her father basically ran our relationship. Every major decision we made somehow benefited his business connections. I told myself it was just family being involved." "Family being involved is one thing," Sophie said. "Her father choosing her fiancé is another." I stared down at the ring box, still in Sophie's hands. I keep thinking about the wedding planning. She wanted everything perfect. Venue, guest list, even the seating chart had to impress certain people. I thought she just cared about details. "She cared about appearances," Sophie said gently. "There's a difference, Ethan." Something about hearing it out loud, from someone who had watched from the outside, made the truth land harder than Bianca's actual words at dinner. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan asked again, quieter this time. "Because you needed to see it yourself," Sophie said. "If I had told you a year ago that Bianca didn't love you the way you loved her, would you have believed me?" I sat with that question for a long moment. "No," Ethan admitted. "I probably would have defended her." "Exactly," Sophie said. "Sometimes people have to fall before they can stand back up stronger." I looked at Sophie, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. She had been there through everything, every high, every low, quietly, without asking for anything in return. "Thank you for not saying I told you so," Ethan said. Sophie smiled softly. "I'm not that person, Ethan. I just want you to be okay." I nodded, feeling something shift inside me. Not healed yet, but no longer completely broken either. "What happens now?" Sophie asked. I looked at the ring box one final time before closing my hand around it. "Now I figure out who I am without her," Ethan said. "And I make sure I never let anyone make me feel small again." 2 weeks after the dinner, sleep had become a stranger to me. I lay awake most nights staring at my ceiling, replaying Bianca's words over and over until they lost all meaning. By morning, I was hollow, running on coffee and stubbornness alone. "Ethan, this is the third deadline you've missed this month," Victor Lang said, standing in my office doorway with a folder in his hand. "I know," Ethan said. "I'll have the Preston project done by tonight." "You said that last week too," Victor said, not unkindly, but firm enough to sting. "I'm handling it," Ethan said. Victor studied me for a moment, his expression softening. "Ethan, I've known you 5 years. You've never missed a deadline before her." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like an excuse. "Take tomorrow off," Victor said. "Come back Monday with a clear head, or don't come back at all until you have one." After he left, I sat alone in my office, staring at blueprints that no longer made sense to me. Numbers blurred. Lines that used to feel like second nature now looked like a language I had forgotten. That evening, I drove to my parents' house without really deciding to. My mother, Grace Cole, opened the door before I even knocked, like she had been waiting for me. "Ethan," Grace said, "you look exhausted." "I'm fine, Mom," Ethan said. "You're lying to your mother," Grace said, stepping aside to let me in. "Sit down. I'll make tea." I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I used to do homework as a kid, where Bianca had once come for Sunday dinner and complimented the quaintness of our house in a tone that I now realized wasn't a compliment at all. "Victor almost fired me today," Ethan admitted. Grace set a cup of tea in front of me, her expression unreadable. "And how do you feel about that?" "Numb," Ethan said. "I don't feel anything anymore, Mom. I just go through the motions." "That's not numbness, Ethan," Grace said. "That's grief." "Grief is for people who died," Ethan said. "Bianca is still alive. She's probably out picking centerpieces for her new wedding." Grace sat down across from me, her hands wrapped around her own cup. "You can grieve a person who's still alive, Ethan. You can grieve who you thought they were." I felt something crack in my chest at those words. I keep asking myself what I did wrong. Was I not enough? Did I not make enough money? Was I too boring, too simple, too? "Stop," Grace said sharply. "Stop right there." I looked up at her, surprised by the force in her voice. "You listen to me, Ethan Cole," Grace said. "Bianca did not leave because you weren't enough. She left because she was never capable of seeing what she had in the first place." "How do you know that?" Ethan asked. "Because I watched you for 2 years," Grace said. "I watched you rearrange your entire life around her schedule, her father's opinions, her idea of success. I watched my son shrink himself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into a life that was never built for him." "I loved her," Ethan said quietly. "I know you did," Grace said, her voice softening. "And that love was real, even if it wasn't returned the way you deserved. But Ethan, loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself for them." "I don't even know who I am without her," Ethan admitted, my voice breaking. Grace reached across the table and took my hand firmly. "Then it's time you found out. What if I'm not enough on my own?" Ethan asked. "What if this is just who I am? Someone people leave." "Listen to me," Grace said, her tone fierce now. "Self-respect isn't something someone gives you, Ethan. It's something you build, brick by brick, decision by decision. Bianca didn't take your worth when she left. She only revealed that you'd already given too much of it away." I sat in silence, letting her words settle over me like something heavy finally being set down. "You have spent 2 years shrinking yourself to fit her mold," Grace continued. "Her father's approval, her friends' opinions, her idea of what a husband should look like. When is the last time you did something simply because it made you happy, not because it made her happy?" I couldn't answer that question. I genuinely couldn't remember. "That's exactly my point," Grace said. Ethan, you are allowed to fall apart right now. Grieving is not weakness. But when you're ready, I need you to remember who you were before she ever walked into that gala. I don't know if I remember that person anymore, Ethan admitted. Then we'll find him again, Grace said, squeezing my hand. Together, if we have to. I felt tears finally break free, the ones I had been holding back since that night at the restaurant. Grace didn't say anything else. She simply held my hand until the tears stopped, until something inside me, exhausted and raw, finally began to settle. Victor gave me tomorrow off, Ethan said eventually. Good, Grace said. Sleep. Eat something. And Monday, you go back in there and you remind yourself why you were good at your job long before Bianca Whitmore ever existed. I nodded, wiping my face, feeling lighter somehow, even if only slightly. Thank you, Mom, Ethan said. Don't thank me, Grace said, standing and kissing the top of my head like she used to when I was young. Just promise me you'll fight your way back to yourself. I promise, Ethan said quietly, meaning it for the first time since that rainy night outside the restaurant. Monday morning, I walked into the office with a clear head for the first time in weeks. Victor Lang was waiting by my desk, a thick folder in his hands and an expression I couldn't quite read. You look better, Victor said. I slept, Ethan said. First time in a while. Good, Victor said, because I need you sharp for this. He dropped the folder on my desk. Singapore, a 12-story sustainable housing project. They want an American architect on site for 18 months to lead the design team. I stared at the folder, then at him. Why me? Because you're the best I've got when you're not falling apart, Victor said bluntly. And because I think you need this more than you realize. 18 months, Ethan said. That's a long time to be gone. It's also a long time to become someone new, Victor said. Ethan, I've watched you shrink for 2 years trying to fit into someone else's life. This is a chance to build your own. I opened a folder, flipping through renderings and project specs, feeling something stir in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. Excitement. I need an answer by Friday, Victor said. This opportunity won't wait, and neither should you. That evening, I called Sophie, needing to talk it through with someone who actually understood me. Singapore, Sophie said, her voice crackling slightly through the phone. Ethan, that's incredible. It's 18 months away from everything, Ethan said. Away from my family, from you, from everything familiar. Ethan, what's actually stopping you? Sophie asked. I hesitated. What if Bianca hears about it? What if she thinks I'm running away? Sophie's voice hardened slightly. Ethan, listen to yourself. You're considering the biggest opportunity of your career, and your first thought is what Bianca will think. Her words hit harder than I expected. You're right, Ethan admitted. God, you're right. Why do I still care what she thinks? Because 2 years of conditioning doesn't disappear in 2 weeks, Sophie said, gentler now. But Ethan, this project has nothing to do with her. This is about you. What if I fail? Ethan asked quietly. What if I go all the way to Singapore and prove I'm not actually good enough? And what if you go and prove you're better than you ever imagined? Sophie countered. Ethan, you spent 2 years asking, what if I fail? Maybe it's time to ask, what if I succeed? I sat with her words for a long moment. You really think I should go? I think you should stop asking me and start asking yourself, Sophie said. What does Ethan want? Not what does Bianca's opinion of Ethan want. Not what does your fear want. What do you want? I closed my eyes, picturing the project renderings, the 12-story building rising against a foreign skyline, my name attached to something entirely my own. I want to go, Ethan said, surprising even myself with how certain it sounded. Then go, Sophie said simply. Ethan, this is your chance to become the person you were always meant to be, without anyone else's shadow over you. Friday morning, I walked into Victor's office with my answer ready. I'll take it, Ethan said. Victor smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in weeks. Good, because I already told him yes. You what? Ethan said, half laughing. I had faith in you, Victor said. Pack your bags, Ethan. You leave in 3 weeks. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of packing, paperwork, and goodbyes. My mother cried when I told her, though she insisted they were happy tears. My father simply hugged me tighter than he had in years, saying only, go build something incredible. Sophie drove me to the airport herself, refusing to let anyone else take that role. Call me when you land, Sophie said, standing outside the terminal. I will, Ethan said. Sophie, thank you. For everything. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. You would have gotten there eventually, Sophie said, smiling. I just helped speed things up. I hugged her tightly, feeling gratitude I couldn't fully put into words. I'm going to miss you. I'll still be here when you're ready to come back, Sophie said. A different Ethan, hopefully. A stronger one. Singapore hit me immediately with its heat, its noise, its relentless energy. The first few months were brutal, long hours, unfamiliar systems, a design team that tested my patience daily. But slowly, something in me began to shift. I stopped checking my phone for messages from Bianca. I stopped comparing every decision to what she might have approved of. I started making choices based on what felt right to me, and only me. 6 months in, our building's foundation was complete. 10 months in, the structure began rising against the skyline, exactly like the renderings I had first seen in Victor's folder. I called Sophie regularly, sharing updates, small victories, occasional struggles. She always listened, always encouraged, never once asking anything for herself. You sound different, Sophie said one night during a call. Different how? Ethan asked. Lighter, Sophie said. Like you're finally becoming yourself again. I feel different, Ethan admitted. For the first time in years, I'm proud of who I'm becoming. By month 12, I had been promoted to lead architect on a second project. My name started appearing in industry publications. My designs praised for their innovative sustainability features. I wasn't the same broken man who had walked out of that restaurant in the rain. I was becoming someone new entirely. Someone Bianca had never known. Someone I was only beginning to discover myself. And somewhere in the back of my mind, quietly but persistently, I began to wonder what would happen when this new version of me finally returned home. 14 months into my time in Singapore, my phone buzzed with a message from Sophie that made me sit up straighter at my desk. Asterisk, call me when you get this. It's about Bianca. Asterisk. I stepped outside the office, dialing her number immediately. Sophie, what's going on? Ethan, you need to sit down for this, Sophie said. I'm standing on a construction site in 90-degree heat, Ethan said. Just tell me. Daniel Rourke is cheating on her, Sophie said, with her own maid of honor. I nearly dropped my phone. Wait, what? It gets worse, Sophie continued. Apparently Daniel's been broke for months. His family's fortune took a hit last year, and he's been living off Marcus Whitmore's money this entire time. How do you know all this? Ethan asked. It's everywhere, Sophie said. Some journalist named Natalie Reyes has been digging into the Whitmore family's business dealings. Ethan, she's found evidence of fraud. I leaned against a nearby railing, processing everything. Fraud? What kind of fraud? Falsified property valuations, Sophie said. Marcus Whitmore's been inflating real estate values for years to secure bigger loans. Natalie's article says investors lost millions when the truth came out. And Bianca? Ethan asked, is she involved in any of this? Not directly, Sophie said, but her entire life is built on her father's money. If his empire collapses, so does everything she has. I stayed quiet for a moment, surprised by how little satisfaction I felt hearing this. I expected relief, maybe even happiness. Instead, I just felt tired. Ethan, are you still there? Sophie asked. I'm here, Ethan said. I just thought I'd feel something bigger than this. What do you feel? Sophie asked gently. Nothing really, Ethan admitted. Like it's happening to strangers I used to know. That's not nothing, Ethan, Sophie said. That's healing. A week later, Natalie Reyes published a follow-up article, this time with direct quotes from former Whitmore Industries employees confirming years of financial manipulation. My father sent me the link with a single message. Asterisk, read this. Then tell me karma isn't real. Asterisk. I read every word carefully, feeling detached from names that once meant everything to me. Marcus Whitmore was being investigated by federal regulators. Daniel Rourke had reportedly moved out of the Whitmore estate entirely. His engagement to Bianca indefinitely postponed, according to unnamed sources close to the family. I called Sophie again that night. Have you talked to anyone who's actually seen Bianca recently? Actually, yes, Sophie said hesitantly. My cousin ran into her at a coffee shop last week. Said she looked completely different. Different how? Ethan asked. Thinner. Tired. Not the polished, perfect Bianca everyone remembers, Sophie said. Apparently she barely said 2 words the whole time she was there. I sat with that information, expecting some flicker of satisfaction. Instead, I mostly just felt strange, like watching an old photograph fade slowly into something unrecognizable. Do you think she regrets it? Ethan asked quietly. Leaving me, I mean. Does it matter? Sophie asked. I don't know. Ethan admitted. Maybe I just want to know if any of it was real. Ethan, does her regret change what she did? Sophie asked. Does it change the 2 years you spent shrinking yourself for her approval? No, Ethan said. I guess it doesn't. Then let it go, Sophie said. Whatever happens to Bianca and her family now isn't your responsibility to feel guilty or happy about. It's simply consequences catching up to choices that were never yours to begin with. I nodded to myself, even though she couldn't see me. You're right. I built so much of my identity around her for so long. It's strange watching her world collapse from this distance. How's your world these days? Sophie asked, gently steering the conversation elsewhere. I smiled slightly, looking out at the glowing skyline of my second completed project, lights illuminating the building I had designed from nothing. Honestly, better than I ever imagined it could be. Then focus on that, Sophie said. Let karma handle the rest. 2 weeks later, Natalie Reyes' investigation expanded into a formal criminal inquiry against Marcus Whitmore. Daniel Rourke's family publicly distanced themselves from the engagement entirely, releasing a statement denying any prior knowledge of financial impropriety. Bianca, once the golden daughter of Manhattan's elite social circles, had become something else entirely, a cautionary tale whispered about at dinner parties, a name attached to scandal rather than status. I read the news updates from thousands of miles away, feeling nothing but quiet acknowledgement. The woman who once measured my worth by the car I drove was now watching her entire world crumble because of choices that had nothing to do with me. For the first time since that rainy night outside the restaurant, I realized something important. I didn't need her downfall to feel complete. My own rise had already given me everything I needed. But somewhere, quietly, I wondered if fate was preparing one final chapter between us, one neither of us could have predicted that night at dinner. 18 months after landing in Singapore, I flew back to New York for a single event, the Architectural Excellence Gala, where my sustainable housing project was being honored as the year's most innovative design. Victor Lang met me at the airport himself, grinning like a proud father. You did it, Ethan, Victor said, shaking my hand firmly. You actually did it. We did it. Ethan corrected. You gave me the chance. I gave you an opportunity, Victor said. You're the one who transformed it into something extraordinary. The gala was held at the same hotel where Bianca and I once attended a New Year's party years earlier. Walking through those doors again felt different this time. Not like returning to old wounds, but like reclaiming space that had once made me feel small. Ethan Cole, a voice said behind me. I turned to find Natalie Reyes, the journalist whose articles had exposed the Whitmore family's fraud, standing there with genuine curiosity in her expression. That's me, Ethan said. I've been wanting to meet you, Natalie said. Your Singapore project has been all over industry publications. Impressive work. Thank you, Ethan said. I've actually been following your reporting too. The Whitmore investigation. Natalie's expression sharpened slightly. You knew them? Bianca Whitmore was my fiancée, Ethan said. Before Daniel Rourke, that is. Natalie's eyebrows raised. That explains a few things I couldn't quite piece together. I always wondered about the timeline of her engagement to Daniel. What do you mean? Ethan asked. Let's just say my investigation goes deeper than the financial fraud, Natalie said. Tonight, some of that might come to light. Marcus Whitmore is here. So is Bianca. My stomach tightened slightly, though not from fear this time, more from anticipation. She's here, sitting 3 tables from yours. Actually, Natalie said. I checked the seating chart earlier. Small world. Before I could respond, Sophie appeared beside me, elegant in a deep blue dress, having flown in specifically for this night. There you are. I got held up at the entrance. Apparently my name wasn't originally on the list. You're my +1, Ethan said, smiling. They should have known that. Sophie linked her arm through mine, glancing toward Natalie. Sorry, am I interrupting? Not at all, Natalie said. I was just telling Ethan tonight might get interesting. As we made our way to our table, I caught sight of Bianca across the room. She looked different than I remembered. Thinner, her usual polish replaced with something more fragile. Daniel Rourke stood beside her, looking equally uncomfortable, glancing around like he expected trouble. Ethan Cole. Marcus Whitmore's voice boomed as he approached our table, forcing false enthusiasm into his tone. I heard about your Singapore project. Very impressive. Thank you, Marcus, Ethan said evenly, no longer intimidated by the man who once dismissed me as beneath his daughter. Perhaps we should catch up sometime, Marcus said. Business opportunities, given your rising reputation. I don't think that's necessary, Ethan said politely but firmly. Marcus's smile faltered slightly before he walked away, clearly unprepared for my newfound confidence. The awards ceremony began shortly after, and when my name was called for the Innovation in Sustainable Design Award, applause filled the room. I walked to the stage, Victor's proud smile visible from our table, Sophie clapping enthusiastically beside my empty seat. This project represents more than architecture, Ethan said into the microphone. It represents what's possible when you stop building your life around other people's expectations and start building something authentically your own. I caught Bianca's eyes briefly from the stage. She looked away first, just like she had that night at the restaurant. Returning to my seat, Natalie approached again, this time with a tablet in hand. Ethan, I need to show you something before I make an announcement tonight. She pulled up a document. Financial records showing Daniel Rourke had been secretly involved with Bianca's own maid of honor for over a year, since before Bianca and Daniel's engagement had even been announced. How long have you had this? Ethan asked. A few weeks, Natalie said. I wanted to confirm everything before going public. Marcus Whitmore's fraud is one story. This is something else entirely, a betrayal within his own family. 15 minutes later, Natalie approached the podium, requesting a moment before the evening's final presentation. The room quieted, sensing something significant approaching. Tonight, I want to share findings from my ongoing investigation into Whitmore Industries, Natalie announced. But there's a personal element to this story that deserves attention. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Natalie displayed the evidence on the room's main screen. Financial records, text messages, time-stamped photos confirming Daniel Rourke's affair with Bianca's maid of honor. Gasps erupted across the room. I watched Bianca's face drain of color entirely, her hand gripping the edge of the table like she might otherwise collapse. This isn't just corporate fraud, Natalie continued firmly. This is a pattern of deception that has hurt real people, people who deserved honesty and received betrayal instead. Daniel stood abruptly, attempting damage control. This is completely fabricated. The evidence speaks for itself, Natalie said calmly, gesturing toward the screen, still displaying incriminating messages. Bianca remained frozen, tears welling in her eyes, as every guest in that room now understood exactly what kind of foundation her engagement had been built upon. I felt Sophie's hand find mine under the table, grounding me as I watched Bianca's carefully constructed world collapse in real time, exactly as mine once had in that restaurant 18 months earlier. Except this time, I wasn't the one falling apart. The room was still buzzing with whispers when Bianca pushed back her chair and walked straight toward our table, ignoring the stares following her every step. Daniel called after her, but she didn't stop. Ethan, Bianca said, standing in front of me, her voice shaking. Can we talk? Please. Sophie's grip on my hand tightened slightly, though her expression stayed calm. I'll give you 2 a minute, Sophie said, starting to rise. No, Ethan said, gently pulling her back down. Whatever Bianca has to say, she can say it here. Bianca glanced at Sophie, then back at me, clearly thrown off by the sight of us together. Ethan, please. This is important. So was I once, Ethan said. 2 years ago. Remember? Bianca flinched. I know I don't deserve to ask this, but I need you to know I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. Which part? Ethan asked. Choosing Daniel? Or getting caught? That's not fair, Bianca said. Isn't it? Ethan said. You didn't come over here because you're sorry, Bianca. You came over here because your entire world just collapsed in front of 300 people, and I'm the only stable thing left in the wreckage. Bianca's eyes filled with tears. Ethan, I loved you. I know that's hard to believe now, but I did. Maybe you did, Ethan said, in whatever way you were capable of loving someone. But love isn't supposed to come with conditions, Bianca. It isn't supposed to disappear the moment someone wealthier walks into the room. I was scared, Bianca admitted. My father always said status mattered more than feelings. I spent my whole life believing that. That's your father's failure, Ethan said, not an excuse for what you did to me. Bianca looked at Sophie again, something like recognition dawning slowly on her face. You two are together. We are, Ethan said simply. How long? Bianca asked. Does it matter? Ethan said, echoing her own words back to her from that rainy night 18 months ago. Bianca's face crumbled slightly. I deserve that. Yes, Ethan said, not unkindly, just honestly. You did. Sophie spoke up gently. Bianca, I'm sorry things turn out this way for you tonight. Genuinely. But Ethan deserves happiness that isn't complicated by guilt or comparison. I just wanted to know if there was still a chance. Bianca said quietly, tears finally spilling over. That maybe we could fix things? Ethan reached over, taking Sophie's hand and lifting it slightly so the ring on her finger caught the light. The very ring Bianca had once returned to me at that restaurant table. Do you recognize this? Ethan asked. Bianca's breath caught. That's the ring I gave back to you. It is, Ethan said. I never thought I'd use it again after that night. But somewhere between Singapore and coming home, I realized it was never about the ring itself. It was about who deserved to wear it. Ethan, Bianca whispered. Sophie stood by me when I had nothing left to offer her. Ethan continued. No status, no confidence, barely any self-respect. She loved me anyway, without conditions, without measuring my worth by what car I drove or what my last name meant at a dinner party. Bianca looked down, tears falling freely now. I really did lose something valuable, didn't I? Yes, Ethan said. But Bianca, that's not my burden to carry anymore. That realization is yours to sit with. Daniel approached hesitantly, clearly sensing the conversation needed to end. Bianca, we should go. She looked at him with something between exhaustion and disgust. Go where, Daniel? Everyone in this room just watched you get exposed as a liar. Bianca, Daniel started. Just stop, Bianca said, turning back to me one final time. Ethan, I hope you're happy. Truly. You deserve it, even if I was too blind to give it to you myself. I am happy, Ethan said, for the first time in a long time. Bianca nodded slowly, then walked away, Daniel trailing behind her, both of them disappearing into a crowd that no longer looked at them with admiration, only pity. Sophie squeezed my hand once Bianca was gone. Are you okay? Better than okay, Ethan said, and meant it completely. Victor approached moments later, raising a glass toward us. To new beginnings, he said, and to people who finally figured out their own worth. To new beginnings, Sophie repeated, clinking her glass against mine. Later that night, standing on the hotel balcony overlooking the city lights, I thought about everything that had led me to this exact moment. The humiliation at that first dinner, the sleepless nights questioning my value, my mother's fierce words about self-respect, Sophie's quiet, unwavering support, and finally, the version of myself I had rebuilt thousands of miles away from everything familiar. Penny for your thoughts? Sophie asked, joining me at the railing. I was just thinking about how strange life is, Ethan said. 18 months ago, I thought my entire world had ended in that restaurant. And now? Sophie asked. Now I realize it was just beginning, Ethan said, turning to face her fully. Sophie, thank you for seeing something in me worth waiting for. I never had to look very hard, Sophie said, smiling. You were always worth it, Ethan. You just needed to believe that yourself. I looked down at the ring on her finger, no longer a symbol of heartbreak, but something entirely transformed, proof that sometimes the most painful endings become the foundation for something far more genuine. I used to think Bianca giving that ring back was the worst moment of my life, Ethan said quietly. And now? Sophie asked. Now I think it might have been the beginning of the best one, Ethan said, pulling her closer as the city lights glittered below us, marking not an ending, but finally, truly, a new beginning.